Now, we saw the first glimpses of a new rivalry under the glistening lights of Bahrain's Sakir circuit as Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc duelled in an engrossing 3-lap battle around the first pit stops. But while bringing back the memories of the desert duel in 2016 was a sight to behold, there were some intriguing tidbits, particularly regarding the newly crowned world champions racecraft. So let's see what the paddock thought of the battle and why Max Verstappen's racing style may have shifted. Now, Leclerc established himself as a championship contender with a convincing victory in Sakir, beating out reigning champion Verstappen for pole and then roundly defeating him in the race even before the Red Bull car gave up on itself. Verstappen was outwitted in all 3 of his advances during the engrossing 3-lap battle. Leclerc's tactics on the brakes into the first corner were flawless, allowing the Red Bull racing driver to take the lead into turn 2 so the Ferrari can slipstream back into first place at turn 4 and defend for the remainder of the lap. In fact, Verstappen's predictable offensive surprised Sky Sports F1 commentator Martin Brundle, who expected more aggression from the Dutchman from the start. I mean, it was Charles slicing across the front of Max into turn 4 at the weekend, and Max didn't send him some of the moves that he certainly sent Lewis last year when it was getting a bit feisty in the championship. Max, we know, is super aggressive, a bit like Ayrton Senna. Ayrton was, "We're going to have an accident today, I'll leave it up to you. I'll send one up the inside, I'll leave it up to you to decide whether we're going to have an accident or not," and established that psychological win even when you saw him in your mirrors. Max certainly has always been an aggressive driver. That's his modus operandi and how he goes about it. I think it's going to be really interesting to see the dynamics between Charles and Max actually, and see how that one plays out. Actually, the 2 potential title contenders have a history dating back to their junior years. Both are 24 years old, their paths in karting and the junior categories had crossed for years before they collided in 2012. The aftermath of the incident was captured by karting magazine T-Kart, which featured a teenage Verstappen complaining that Leclerc battled unfairly and pushed him off the track. In Formula 1, their roles were reversed at the 2019 Austrian Grand Prix when Verstappen made a late charge for the lead down Leclerc's inside at turn 3, knocking him off track, and he was able to keep his victory after a lengthy steward's investigation. Leclerc's response came at the next race in Silverstone, where he made a point of taking the fight to the Dutchman, with the pair repeatedly banging wheels and the Monegasque finishing ahead. "I expect that to ramp up if Ferrari are race in, race out, season-long contenders," says Brundle. "I think that will ramp up quite a lot, and I expect some fireworks between the young guys, not forgetting of course Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez, and I fully expect Mercedes to join that battle." Now, it remains to be seen whether Ferrari can put together a sustained challenge. Bahrain was Maranello's first victory in more than 2 years, and it hasn't been able to propel a driver to within a whisker of the championship in 10 years, when Fernando Alonso failed to take the title down to the wire in 2012. Since then, the team has struggled with inconsistency in decision-making and uncompetitive cars. However, with the machinery question resolved, at least for the time being, the next test of Ferrari's challenge is execution. If both drivers are on form, the true champions always deliver every weekend. Whether it's wet or dry, slippery, challenging, red flag, safety cars, strange strategies, working on the tyres, they've got to be on top of all of that. And if they can do that and not drop the ball anywhere, then they'll be genuine World Championship contenders. You're looking for that consistency really, that Red Bull and Mercedes know how to do because they won so many championships in those 7 years. Max Verstappen's weekend, on the other hand, could only be described as frustrating, as the Dutchman revealed the car didn't feel right on Sunday, let alone the fuel pump issue that forced him to retire. I mean, what happened at the end is obviously very frustrating, but of course before that, quite a few issues. First of all, the balance was off. I didn't have the same feeling as on Friday on the long runs, so that was a bit disappointing. Then suddenly my steering, I don't know what happened to that, it was just completely locked, and the faster I was going, I could barely steer. So it was not easy on the restart to defend from Carlos, but then I was still in second with that big issue, so you think, okay, with all these issues that I've had today, second would be a good result, and then suddenly I had to retire, everything just switched off. Martin Brundle, writing in his Sky Sports column, believes Verstappen was angry throughout the fight, highlighting that the Red Bull's driver pursuit of another title victory is likely to galvanise him and the team behind the scenes. Verstappen seemed angry for much of the race, angry that he perceived he was not allowed to push hard enough after his first 2 pit stops to undercut Leclerc and have track position out front, angry that his tyres faded quite quickly, then very angry that his power steering had taken a knock after being lowered off the front jack on his final pit stop, and then the cruel race-ending reliability issues. Of course, while the battle between Leclerc and Verstappen was the weekend's highlight, it's important to look into how the new regulations have affected the racing. The new car specifications, which emphasized downforce generated through the floor, were implemented to make it easier for cars to stay in the wake of the car in front through corners by reducing turbulent air. And while several drivers have reported that following others has become easier since the season opening Bahrain Grand Prix, two-time world champion Fernando Alonso believes the jury is still out on whether there will be more overtaking this year. According to the Alpine driver, drivers will still require significant speed difference to pull off moves, which is typically only the case when there is a significant difference in tyre life between two cars. Following was definitely easier. We spotted already in the test that it was easier to follow cars, but overtaking is still not as easy as it seems on TV. I think all the overtaking we saw today was because one car had 2 seconds more pace on newer tyres than others. I met cars that I was 2 seconds faster than, and I overtook in a few corners, and I also met cars that were 2 seconds faster than me, and they overtook me in 2 or 3 corners. I think the tyre is the biggest differentiating factor still, not the following. So we need to see, we need to drive more races. Meanwhile, Esteban Ocon, Alonso's teammate, believes the 2022 F1 rules are a step in the right direction, though he does note that the tow and DRS mechanisms are less powerful on the new generation of cars. DRS is actually less powerful than it was, and towing in general is less powerful than it was. I think you can overtake, you can follow a lot closer than before, and the car is less affected by following another one, so that's going very much in the right direction, but it still does affect you a little bit. But it has reduced the towing effect quite a lot. I think what makes it very easy to pass on the moves you saw is probably the tyre difference. Mercedes driver George Russell, on the other hand, said he didn't notice much of a difference from either the ability to follow or Pirelli's new tyres. It didn't feel massively different from within, to be honest. It's definitely not worse following. Bahrain's always difficult because of the surface, and the tyres don't seem to be a huge improvement on last year, and we're still sliding around quite a lot. And that's made it much harder with the 40 to 50 kilo increase in car mass, so it's definitely not as enjoyable to drive. Lando Norris, who had a disastrous weekend with McLaren, said he was expecting more from the 2022 rules, despite the fact that he struggled in general with a car that lacks downforce at the best of times. It was tough. It wasn't as good as I was expecting, which is a bit frustrating. I was expecting a little bit more. When you get close, you still just slide at the rear as easy as you need to, and you lose the front. The tyres get hot, you just go off a cliff again. I would say it's a little bit better, but you still lose a lot of downforce. I'd say maybe not as much as everyone was hoping for. Ross Brawn, F1's managing director of motorsports, said the 2022 Bahrain Grand Prix was an ideal start for the new era of Formula 1 cars, as he reflected on whether the 2022 cars had met their goal. Well, it's been a great start, but it's a sample of one. We need to see how this works now when the teams start to develop the cars, what direction they go in. But I hope we proved the philosophy today. I hope we've shown that there really is an opportunity to make much better racing cars, and I think this is just the start. When we start to look at it in much more detail, the data from these cars, how they're behaving, we can start to plan the next phases of improving the raceability of these cars. So it remains to be seen whether the new F1 cars can live up to the promises made since 2020. There have been some encouraging signs, but the drivers' reactions has been mixed. Only time will tell if F1 can return to its former glory. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and remember to click the bell button to be notified of future videos. Please leave your comments in the section below, and we'll see you next time.